And I've got a deck. I'm going to primarily drive the talk from the deck. I will pop into a couple of tabs, a couple of notebooks, even Colab notebooks. I've decided to, for the most part, I've decided to just punt on the live demo. I've got some screenshots, but the Colab notebooks, I do need to sync them with the recent versions of the library. I will do that today, but they should be. Some of them are functional right now. There's a couple of them that need an update before they'll work end to end. But I am going to show ideally a few of them on this call today. Okay, so I want to get more into the nitty gritty contribution, the hands-on stuff. But I want to set the stage a little bit here and just talk about the problem statement. So. And I'll give you a little bit of my background too. I've been with IBM for 3 years, IBM Research, up until earlier this week, and now I'm in a part of the organization that's more closely aligned with the products that we're building. So that'll be a fun and interesting challenge. I come from a legal tech background 7 years prior, and I've got a career that goes back before that, .com in the 90s. I'll mention that I took my first AI class 30 years ago, and I've been thinking about that a little bit. 30 years ago, the Russell Norvig book was published, and it was in the upper left-hand corner, there was a banner. It was the Intelligent Agent book. So that notion has been around a long time. It predates LLMs by quite a bit, and the transformer architecture. So it's just an interesting footnote to history. But the other thing that happened in 1995 that I was reminded of was the Apache group started releasing Apache, and that was a big moment in open source. And then in that class that I was taking, this is a more recent thought. There was the last project was a capture the flag. It was hands-on. You had the option to do a written assignment for the final project or something hands-on coding. I was always drawn to the hands-on coding, but it was a little intimidating. The TA had written a server that was gonna basically run a capture the flag tournament, and the students would submit their clients. But it was a little daunting because I was probably looking at a lot of just fiddling with this was written in C. Low-level network stuff. Probably was going to spend most of my time just working on the networking code. But there was another student who actually published some stubs. None of the AI, but he just published a client and said, write your AI here. And I think that any guesses as to how he ended up doing? He ended up winning the tournament. It didn't hurt him at all. And in fact, I think it raised the level of competition substantially. He created a bunch of much stronger competitors, and we would post our solutions and play against each other, and we could watch each other's strategy get more and more sophisticated as I think it was about 3 weeks went on. So I've always thought of AI and open source as very deeply linked. And for someone like me, I'm always drawn to the more of the kind of product or the algorithmic side of things, and not so much the system side of things. That has been a part of my career. But getting back to the talk at hand, I am very interested in the concepts of quality and to some extent cost, but user experience. What does it mean to be building agentic products out in the market? I again spent 7 years in legal tech, so the data that I'm going to show is legal data. I've seen great content on this topic from Neo4j and others from like SEC filings. You can do a lot with that. The point here is not to build a full product, but to just demonstrate the concepts end to end, meaning including data processing and including a realistic collaborative enterprise environment. In this case, it'll be Slack. On the note of quality, I think there's a lot that's been written about RAG. I'm kind of assuming that most folks on the talk are passingly familiar with RAG. We're going to be talking about some techniques beyond that, and why they're powerful, why they would be appropriate in a domain like legal. Okay, So I'll talk a little bit about the big picture setup. I'll show, so the meetup posting, I mentioned the project Proscenium. That's how it started. And I'm a couple hundred commits into that. It started a little over 3 months ago. I think it was early February. I more recently factored out a couple of sub projects. So Proscenium was how it started. Then I realized it was taking on, the legal demo aspect of it was a good hunk of code. So I factored that out. That's now called Bartlebot. And then there was another piece of it that I factored out most recently, which was just the data processing piece that leads up to the creation of the what I'll call the knowledge structures in general, or knowledge graph specifically. So those are the 3 projects we're going to look at. They're all open source, fairly new, maybe 300 commits between the 3 of them, and would love your input, and especially discussion. There's a calendar that I can post a link to. I've actually published that publicly, the FA3 calendar, and some of the meetings, like the Proscenium meeting, are open for people to join, and that I think takes place every other Tuesday afternoon, East Coast time. Okay, so a little bit about the why I'm doing this. For various reasons, I want to publish open recipes for enterprise AI patterns. It's part of my job. And I also kind of go back to the story about my experience in an AI class. I think a lot of people are just kind of stuck with the how. And I think the much more interesting is to talk about the what and the why. So I would like to help elevate the conversation, so we can talk about more the meat of enterprise. And then also, I'm interested to talk about what it would mean to publish more of these knowledge structures. So what I'm going to demonstrate is extracting a knowledge graph from legal data. And I was involved with the creation of that legal data set 10 years ago. It was a project, what's now called the Case Law Access Project. There was a talk called, I think, Transforming Justice. There was an event last spring in Cambridge. Basically, I was on the startup side at Ravel Law, and we were working with Harvard Law Library they basically destroyed the library. They cut off the spines of all the books, scanned them, fed them through an OCR process, and the targets for the metadata quality were extremely high. It's a very high quality data set. It's been used to train most, if not all, foundation models at this point. But I think, and they've published that data set now on Hugging Face, and it's there with a lot of metadata. That metadata creation was a part of the initial idea. But that data set keeps going through revisions. They're improving the OCR all the time. And I think there are, I don't know what their plans are for continuing to extract metadata. I think they're basically done. But there's other valuable information inside of those documents that I would love to figure out how to publish back for the world to use, just like the data set itself was published. And I think that can be done reasonably cheaply these days. And then we could talk about what it would mean to get some sort of endorsement that the quality of those extractions meet a certain level, so that they could be used in products. All right, I'm going to pop to the next one. Some caveats about all the stuff I'm going to show you very early. It's just these are all just solo projects right now. I would love your participation and help with any of it. But I mentioned it is end to end. I do really think having a domain specific example is very important, so we don't just get kind of stuck talking about a few layers of architecture. I'm making incremental improvements. We decided to make this project public from day one. So that means I'm kind of going through all of the awkward bug fixes and so forth in public. But hopefully you can see that we've been chipping away. I've been chipping away over the last 3 months towards something that's hopefully going to make sense and potentially be usable by you. Okay, and then also I've got some notebooks. You'll see some of those, and there are some others that I won't show today, but you'll be able to find those on the websites of the projects. Okay, so the first one, and I'm just gonna grab a water here. Bear with me 1 second. The first project that I'm gonna talk about is Proscenium. So I don't know if this was part of my vocabulary a few months ago, but I was thinking about if any of you are familiar with the actor concurrency paradigm. I was thinking about agents as basically just being actors with some special tools that they can leverage, and so that led to this kind of theater-based name for the project. So proscenium is the arch over the stage of a theater stage. So what remains as proscenium now, that has not been factored out, is effectively you can think of it as a Slack integration. The aspiration is for it to be a little bit more than that, but I think just simply defining how we're going to distribute the various characters, as I'll call them, to continue with the theater analogy, into channels. So proscenium defines a production. That's kind of the biggest concept. A production is composed of scenes, and scenes are composed of props and characters. And then actually, let me see if I can, well, yeah, I'll stay with the slides for just a minute. So there's a couple of non-legal, just hello worlds that I got up and running. And again, this is very rough, but a couple of hello world things. One I'm just calling the abacus character, and the other one is like a high school English teacher. The abacus knows how to just do basic arithmetic, and this literature high school English teacher knows about 2 books. And I've just applied the RAG pattern to, and this is configurable, but I think I'm pulling in Walden. And then this here in particular is Aeschylus's 4 plays. So this is just enough, kind of a little bit beyond hello world to show how I'm going to interact with the inference service and show how the Slack integration works. Okay. These couple of links to Lapidaris project. I'll pop into those in a little bit. Okay, so before we get into talk about the Meteor legal example and the extracting knowledge from the unstructured data, I'll just show you this. And I've pre-baked this turkey, but you can see in a fairly short notebook, you can pip install Proscenium. There's a demo. It comes in the test directory. It comes with a little bit of demo code and a configuration file. You can see in this case, I'm using AI Suite. This is Andrew Ng's project, just to give me. And I know that project has evolved beyond this a little bit, but AI Suite, the way I'm using it, allows me just a nice way to abstract over all of the various providers' inference services. So in this case, I'm using the Llama 4 Maverick 17B hosted on Together.ai. And then I'm creating, this is a character, the abacus, and then I'm asking what 1 + 2 is. And in this case, I've been a little loose about this. In this case, it's returning it in the markup here. But you can see it's demonstrating tool calls, basically. So I'm using GoFanon, which is a sister project within the Alliance. It's a tool registry. I plugged in its addition tool, and you can see that the inference call recognizes that it can apply the addition tool, and then we evaluate it, and then we can generate a response. And here's the response. And here's the configuration for that. You can see, there's 2 scenes in the default. We've got this elementary school math class where we can do basic arithmetic, and we're going to bind that to the Slack channel called Proscenium Abacus. And then this high school English class, we'll bind that to the Slack channel called Literature. And this is basically a Milvus, a vector database specific configuration parameter. And we're using LLMs in a few different ways. I've got a slide at the end where we enumerate all the ways that we're using LLMs, but it's important to kind of parameterize all of them separately. So in this limited case, I'm using LLMs to generate a response and to do a little bit of control flow management. Okay, and then I'll pop over to a Colab notebook, and the links to these notebooks, by the way, are in the websites for the projects. So the Proscenium project specifically has links to these Colab notebooks. Okay, so this is a RAG example. This is the Abacus was demonstrating tool use. Here we're gonna show RAG, and again, this is a pre-baked turkey. You can see that this is where we're loading the chunks from those two books into just a local Milvus, local to the notebook. We're going to create this literature expert character, and then here's our question: what does Hermes say to Prometheus about giving fire to humans? And you see, it's a little ugly. We probably don't want these chunk IDs in there like that, but we've answered the question. So, and I see some. Maybe I'll pause after this and take a couple questions before we go into the legal knowledge graph example. So this just gives us some basic building blocks that I needed to get in place so that I could move on to the knowledge graph work, which I wanted to spend a lot of time with. So, okay, I'll pause and I'll take a couple of questions.
All right, we got a couple questions here. I don't quite understand this first one, but let's go to the second one. If I have a logical data model for several business functions, how can I add to what you are doing? And this is from Amin. Amin, if you want to clarify, you can. But is that making any sense to you, Adam?
Yeah, I'll answer it maybe just quickly here, but I think maybe to connect with him later, maybe on the discussions, we'd be able to get in deeper into it. But yeah, I think what I'm trying to do is structure these so that the code in the test directory is something that you could kind of drop into and see your see how you would maybe riff on that, use that as a template to add your business logic. And again, the concepts that Proscenium is creating are these theater concepts, which I kind of like. It's not perfect, but you can see like here, for instance, this is a character, and the character has behind the scenes. If you look at the code, the prop is basically the chunked the bookshelf, basically the chunks of the two books that are on the bookshelf. So I think it's they're not too constraining. At the end, if you're going to tie to Slack, then you need a way to think about the different groupings of tools and props and capabilities. So that's what the character gives you, and the prop is just something that's almost more of kind of administrative. And I think we'll do more with that in the future. But at the highest level, we're binding characters to channels, basically. Cool. Yeah, let me just pop into I'll just show you these sites. Make sure you have a sense that these are real. So this is the Proscenium website. Pretty simple. There's a link to the repository here, and we've got discussions enabled. And then let me up over to Lapidarist. So this is going to be kind of some of this code was involved with the chunking of the books. Oh, sorry, let me get this on screen. So this is the code that was involved with the chunking of the books in that English class example. But the much more interesting work for me is the mining of the knowledge graph. I've got a little image down here of a knowledge graph that I extracted from I think 4 legal documents I was parsing to produce that image, and that's a screenshot of a Neo4j sandbox. By the way, that's not a visualization that I had to do any work to create. Okay, so now let me pop over to BartleBot. So I spent a little bit of time on this image here. BartleBot it's cold in the office. It is a robot, but but it's cold, so it wears a hat.
Before you move on, I have a quick question. I may have pinned onto something you said earlier. You said you were working on a project where you tore the binders off and scanned a lot of books from the legal library. Are those documents in this?
I'm not storing them here. I have a reference to the Hugging Face data set.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I was just concerned that this may have copyrighted data.
No, they're not in here. Yeah, there's a reference to it. Yeah, I don't have the link.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
It pulls down the Hugging Face data set dynamically at runtime.
Got it.
Yeah. And in fact, that was my life for several years, was making sure that there wasn't copyrighted material in that data set. That's something I spent a bunch of time on. So, and for instance, there in those books, there is copyrighted material, but that has all been redacted.
Got it. Thank you.
And there was a tremendous amount of time and effort put into making sure that that was true. All right. So this is the Bartlebot project. You can see I've got a Colab link here. I've got again a pre-baked turkey over here. Let me just I'll pop over to that. And the meat of this, and it goes on below what I'm going to show right here. The meat of this is, and yeah, maybe this answers your question, Bill. If I can pull it out of the output. But yeah, at the beginning of the extraction is just a reference to the Hugging Face data set right here. And then it's this code. In order to run the notebook, you would have had to set up your own Neo4j sandbox instance. So it would be the user of this project who is going to be storing those extracted nodes and relationships. But for the purposes of the demo, I'm just taking the first 10 documents. And those just kind of stream by. And again, this is just ephemeral. This is just what happens when you run it. And then I'll go back to the slides here. One of the main kind of conceptual things that's sometimes hard to get across, and I don't know if I'm going to nail it here, but there is a lot of valuable information bound up in the unstructured data in a corpus like this. And I think this is representative of a lot of corpora. Yes, there's metadata, and you can do a lot just by building a graph from the metadata that's already been mined. But even just looking at this, I mean, we see place names here: Hillsborough County Superior Court. So there's the geography there, Hillsborough County, and then the court that relates to that county. Oops. But there are often times when somebody who wants to grapple with this corpus really wants to be able to filter on that, and applying, I would say, more traditional search techniques to do that can maybe get you there. But I think sometimes when you're asking a very precise question, you want to be able to reference that as an entity and do a precise query. I'm working on motivating. One of the problems I have is I don't have this corpus, even this New Hampshire subset that I'm working with. I don't have those extractions published anywhere, and I haven't ever done a run where more than a few dozen. So if and when we can run a much larger extraction, and whether that's stored locally or we could figure out how to publish that, then you can start to ask more interesting questions. And then the layer beyond that would be to pair that with your own enterprise documents. So the big picture is there's context for most businesses. There's some reference material out there that help provide the market with some context about how you're creating value. So in this case, if you're a law firm, then this is a corpus that it clearly is a part of how you do business. But there's also a lot of internal documents, like let's say a matter management system. You're some big Fortune working in a law department in some big Fortune 500 company, the matter management system where you're managing all of your legal documents. There's a rich, but sometimes decades worth of really valuable information. Because if you can mine that into a form that can service precise queries and tie that to public reference material like that, also that's also been prepared in a way that facilitates these precise queries, then you really got something. So that's kind of the big picture of what I'm working towards. Let's see. I saw there were a couple of questions kind of stream by. Maybe we could stop here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. I'll read a couple of them to you. By the way, just follow up from Amin. He or she said, I had an idea to use the glossary from the data model as input to the RAG. So kind of interesting to get people to contribute data. That'd be great. All right, following up here from Abanaya, more of a fundamental context setting question, but when do you use knowledge graphs over RAG?
Yeah, it's hard to articulate. I don't think anybody has nailed, I haven't seen anybody nail that, but I think when you're asking precise questions that really require, I feel like I'm going to give a circular answer here. I've only seen answers to this question that are very oblique. Like I saw a talk a couple weeks ago. Somebody was asking some embedding space. This person took the numbers 1 through 100 and computed the cosine similarity between in that space between the number 50 and all those other numbers. And this person thought that that it was expecting to see maybe like the distance, like the additive distance. So numbers 1 and 100 would be least similar, and numbers 49 and 51 would be most similar, because I think this person's assumption was that it would be like the additive distance, that's what similarity should mean. But I think that the problem is that we have those kinds of spaces, and we're almost overloading what we're trying to mean by similar, and there are sometimes quite distinct like the other thing that showed up in the chart was that anything that was divisible by 10 seemed a lot more, according to that embedding space, seemed a lot more similar to the number 50 than the numbers, like the number 10, for instance, was much more similar to 50 than 9 and 11. To me, that kind of makes sense because they share a couple of common factors, but it just depends on the context of the question. So that was one conversation I've seen recently about like why structured information is worth deriving. Another one I've seen, I don't know, Alexi, if this was a Neo4j post or something like that, but it was like a picture of an apple, and there was the vector representation of apple, and then there was the graph representation of apple, and very different. And the graph representation had several different kinds of fields and values and enumerations that applied to it. I think they're both very valuable, and if you can use them in tandem, they can both help each other, help each other, help you navigate that space and answer questions. But I think it's about like precision, and it's about completeness. Those are two words which you have a hard time often getting from the vector space that you might use with RAG. So what I'm trying to do in these examples here are come up with, and again, I'm working with a very small, like 10 document set, so it's hard to find real examples here that would be useful for a lawyer. But the oldest decision date in the New Hampshire jurisdiction, I mean, that's pretty simple. But what this demonstrates is that, first of all, we've got some query understanding, and to the point where we can actually generate a cipher query against the knowledge graph without having to write any custom code at all. This is totally generic. All you have to do, this is kind of like any text to SQL, but it's text to cipher. I'm correctly in this case forming the cipher query. executing it, and then the generator is doing something reasonable. You can see, you know, I haven't spent a lot of time on this. This is just like the first thing that came out a few days ago, but it, you know, in a roundabout way is answering the question. So a lot of what's going on here has nothing to do per se with the knowledge graph, but the fact that we have all of this well-structured, precise information that also, by the way, can, and in many cases really should be endorsed by your subject matter experts. This is, maybe I'll just come back and land on this. I mean, this is why I've kind of chosen this kind of diamond with a knowledge graph overlaid on it to represent this, that a lot of times when I am around people that are building AI systems, AI agents, there is kind of just this, they're just charging ahead with doing like a RAG pattern or something. And like the concerns of the broader business context or the impact of quality concerns, we're just so busy building this stuff that we don't think about that. But I think in many cases, producing those knowledge structures, whether you think about them as the document enrichments, we're done with, that's what we're going to call the knowledge structure, or move on and talk about some populated vector database or a knowledge graph. There's a couple moments in there where you might want to pause and bring in some evaluation and say, yes, I have distilled the best possible knowledge graph, and I'm now going to store that, snapshot that, and version that, and curate that, so that as the document set evolves, I'm going to incrementally extend that knowledge graph, but I'm not just going to kind of blow it away and treat it as an ephemeral data structure. It's something that has a lot of value, and in fact is a part of the virtuous cycle that I think these systems can help create. As there is a network effect, almost kind of by definition. The more your business grows and the more you represent them in this structured way, the more angles you have to A, produce value, but B, also spot quality problems. So that's a long answer to your question, but
yeah. You know, I love how you dig into it and go really deep. I'll just share one example, and I also want to invite Alexei, who's kind of spends his time talking about this all the time over at Neo4j, to chime in if he would like to. But just like a super simple example that I'm working on is we're scraping data from a website and putting it into a RAG application. It's really a simple use case, and you can ask questions of the website in it's a little project called Alleycat. But what I'd love to do in working with the Neo4j folks to add a little example to it is to use the sort of infer the structure of the website to identify categories where there could be like nodes of information, so that when somebody asks a question, for example, about an event, it understands that the pages underneath the events folder are directly related to events, which can then do a better job of identifying like, oh, this information is about an upcoming event or a past event, and therefore if somebody's asking about something to do with a timeline of events, then the information is likely underneath that folder. And so then it can filter out the other noise where people might be talking about, other types of events. So that's just one example, but it's a really good question, and I've puzzled over that as well, because people who are into knowledge graphs are really into them. So once you figure out how to use them, it seems to be extremely powerful.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if Alexei wants to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for the great overview, Adam. And I mean, the beauty of graphs, right, is effectively you can make them whatever you want. So it's really, you can. I'm thinking of structured output. So this is a very powerful technique. So you can effectively have a bunch of documents processed by LLM, and you can ask it to output the schema. So if you have a node schema and it says, I want events listed as these records, you should have dates and locations, right? And maybe I want speakers with separate nodes. So you can create all the schemas, and you can make LLMs output this schemas is, and you can easily make the cipher, for insertion into Neo4j. So you can, I highly recommend looking at MCP for Neo4j. So we had MCP server since announcement of MCP by Anthropic. We did it early in December. So our VP of Developer Strategy, Michael Hunger, will be in town for AI Engineer World Fair, and on June 3rd, we're going to have meet up with the Alliance, and Vishay Eva and Max from Agri Research organized. And so Michael will present it there. So I think it's super relevant because you can effectively configure MCP server in Neo4j that will understand natural language commands, such as get all these pages, extract all these events as if you use structured output from .txt, which is another startup that has a product called Outlines. So you can basically teach it to use structures of the nodes, and then you just put them in Neo4j. So I think it can be worthwhile vibe coding. So Dave, I think you can vibe code this now with MCP if you try. Yes, that's just some of the ideas here.
Cool. Thank you, Alexei. And yeah, I'll just say one last final word, and so we'll see if there's any other questions. But I was just sort of paging through. We're very early. I was just sort of, these are some swags on how far I think I am relative to just like producing an MVP. So I'm not sort of purporting that this is ready for production yet. This is on the path. But and those are just the items that I've started. There's a lot more big ticket items that still need work that I haven't really even started to address. So stay tuned. Maybe we can do an update, Dave, in a few months. The one thing that I'll just mention briefly is the choice to do a Slack integration. Probably made that decision like 5 or 6 weeks ago. This came up in a discussion I was having yesterday, talking about just where we need to invest in, the broader community need to invest in agentic systems and common protocols and that sort of thing. And there were a couple of us who brought this up, and I feel emboldened to kind of stay on this path. That I think before we start talking a lot about agent-to-agent protocols, I think we've got a lot of work to do yet on agent-to-human. And I think a lot of that actually winds up being very useful for human-to-human interactions. I think so. Focusing on delivering this sort of system via Slack, I think helps put me in that kind of mindset where there's a lot of feedback mechanisms. There are such as likes or threads, or you can provide negative feedback. There are other parallel channels. Sometimes you get a one-on-one direct message from somebody that, about a public thread, maybe advising you on something you've missed or something like that. You can be booted from channels. There's actually a rich set of interactions and a rich language for how you might want to build agents. So the other big one is just being passive, just observing. When do you decide to speak up? If you're tagged directly with a question, well, that's a pretty clear indicator. But there are other times too when you might want to pipe up and offer something of value. But of course, that's probably got to be a lot cheaper than you maybe use a much smaller model for that than you would to actually churn through the generation of a response to a direct legal question, for instance. So yeah, I'm happy with the Slack. Slack is not everything. Not only are there other collaboration chat systems, but I think document editors are an important category of delivering these kinds of systems. So again, kind of that focus on from the data inputs, both public reference material and enterprise internal, and then the full stack aspect. I'm going to stick with those as we move forward, but there's still a lot of work yet to do. So I appreciate all of your questions today. I can stick around for a few more, and otherwise going to look forward to getting your feedback in the future.
All right, great, thanks. Just a couple comments from some folks here. Let's see, from Ruse or Ruzi, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but when you want accuracy and/or reasoning, it's also not a replacement for RAG, but more of a structured guidance tool. Oh, I guess that wasn't a question. Never mind. All right.
So more of an answer.
Yeah, more of an answer. Ian is also commenting, working on a similar project as well, but with a different use case, web scraping, knowledge base, RAG application. Okay, so I think that's it for the questions. Bob had asked for the links. Thanks, Tim, for adding the links in the chat just above there. And let's see. I think that's it for the questions for right now. I just a couple of overall comments. While if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to add them into the chat. We'll get to them. We have a couple more minutes here. But there's a couple of people. Saurabh asked, do we receive the slides and links in the email? Yes, we will. Once the recording is published, we will share this in an email. It does sometimes take us a few days, so be patient, and we will get that to you. And then, yeah, Bob, that'll include the repos as well. We'll make sure we let's make sure that we get the repos from that we put here, that Tim put here in the chat, and make sure we include those in the email. And there was one other question above. Yeah, Saurabh had asked, can you share what our relationship is with IBM? Tim did answer this. I didn't mention it in our opening, and I should have. And that is simply that Tim and I and Santana were on the community team. We do work for IBM, but we are full-time, 100% focused on AI Alliance. And just one last comment about that is the AI Alliance is made up of all these companies. It was originally founded by IBM and Meta, and we're both heavily dedicated to open source and just collaborating in the open around AI. And even though we're very different companies, we have that one thing in common. And so that's kind of what brought us together. And then now there's all these other companies who've joined in who are interested in the same, such as, Alexi, who's on the call here from Neo4j, and a few others of you. So if you want to continue, this discussion, please join us in our, I would say the first place to go is go check out the projects. You can see one of them right there, Bartlebot. You can take a look at the project. You can ask a question in the discussions. And if you want to see other projects, just go to github.com/the-ai-alliance, and you can see our other projects that are in the repos there, or in that org. You can see the other repos for the projects. And just come back and join us on this weekly, we call them office hours because they're primarily discussing our projects, but we do have talks from other members about non-projects, and even sometimes topics that are not directly related to our projects, but we are primarily project focused. So yeah, please come back, join us. And yeah, with that, let's see. Yes, we'll share the URL, and I think that's it. All right, well, thank you very much, Adam, for sharing with us what you're working on. I know you're continuing to work on it, and maybe this gives us an opportunity to include some others who might want to contribute.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you all.
All right, take care, everyone. Have a great weekend here in the U.S. We got a 3-day weekend. So for those in the U.S., and hope you enjoy your weekend, and the rest of you have a nice weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.